Hi, I'm Christi and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm here to chat about some post-apocalyptic romance recs. So if you've been around here for a while, then you know that I'm absolutely obsessed with Claire Kent's post-apocalyptic romances. And so her recent one in the series just came out last week and I read it and loved it. And so it got me in the mood to talk about all of her books in this series / part of this world because I love them so much and more people need to read them. So I used to do more of these kind of like series reviews or recommendations on my channel, I think like a year and a half ago, maybe last year. And so I used to do them a lot more. Kind of fell off that wagon, but I wanted to talk about this one in particular just because I feel like so many more people need to read it because it's so good. All right, so like I mentioned, I'm here with Claire Kent's post-apocalyptic romances. So she does have a whole series, which is called the Kindled series. There's also another book, part of the series, but like not technically a part of the series. It's like a standalone, but exists in that world. And you definitely should read it as well because it's so good. And we see some of the characters and like all of that. So anyways, I'm going to talk about all of them. So all the books that I'm going to talk about, they are on Kindle Unlimited. And like I said, I highly recommend them. They're so good. Basically, the books in this series are set in the near future after a global catastrophe. So basically in here, Earth was hit by an asteroid that hit Europe, took out that entire continent, which kind of just wreaked havoc on everything, set off a lot of natural disasters. It wreaked havoc obviously on population, environment, the economy, just kind of like the world in general kind of closed down. So all the books in this series, they take place years later after this event. Some are like right after, some are a couple years after. I think we're even up to like 10 years post that happening. So yeah, that's what's happening in their world. And so yeah, the people remaining just live in this very like post-apocalyptic world where daily life is just very dangerous. It's very isolating, a lot of survival stories. It gets gritty, it gets dark, but it's just so good. And seeing like the glimmers of hope that these characters have is just everything once they find their kind of like partner. Like I said, the stories do get kind of grim and dark and just kind of these people trying to stay alive. Some darker things happen, so just check content warnings if you need it as well for the series. This series just really works well for me because I love closed off, grumpy, cold, kind of broody heroes, and this series delivers that every single time. All right, so we're just gonna break it down by book. So first up is Last Light. This is the one that I said it's part of the world and series, but it's not like technically part of the series, if that makes sense. So yeah, this one I definitely recommend reading, possibly first because you're kind of introduced to some characters that you'll see later on. All right, so in this one we follow Lane and Travis, and they meet at the beginning of the story or run into one another, and at first she's super wary of him because it's like dangerous times, men in general in this world, you kind of want to be wary, and so she kind of tries to escape, but he ends up knowing her, or they both know one another, where he kind of was in the same neighborhood or knew her grandparents back in the day, and so like before impact happened, which is what the whole like catastrophe that happened to Earth is what it's mentioned and called as, so they knew of one another pre-impact. So he's kind of trying to convince her that there's nothing to be afraid of with him, but of course she's like wary. So then a little bit later we see them running into one another again, and he ends up saving her, and so then they start traveling together kind of on the road and just kind of like trying to keep one another alive. This whole series has a ton of age gaps, so if you love age gap and a gruff cold hero, this series definitely delivers. So the hero in this one, Travis, he definitely feels like he's too old for Lane, and so that's definitely his struggles. This one, it get like a road trip. They're on this adventure together. There's only one bedtime, a ton, like the close forced proximity is just so good. It's very much like this isolated feeling, which I really enjoy. So yeah, we know he's over there kind of struggling with his feelings of feeling too old for her, but then one of the nights she requests that he make her feel something good for once in this like a grim world that they're living in, and it kind of kicks off from there. I really enjoyed this one. All right, so next up is Haven, which is technically the first book of the Kindled series, but like I said, Last Light kind of gives you a little glimpse of the world as well, sets up some of the characters, so I definitely recommend reading it first, but you could totally jump into Haven reading this one first because I did that and I was totally fine as well. So this one's a novella length, and here we follow Faith and Jackson. So basically they've lived around one another for 9 years. Her family actually owned this farm, the New Haven farm, pre the impact happening, and so they continue to live there now. And so basically her family would bring in a lot of like foster children and things like that, and so he was one of the children that her family kind of brought in and let live and work at their farm. And so now we catch up to them now after impact has happened and all of that. It's a couple years later. Their book I think is possibly 5 years after impact, could be totally wrong, but I feel like it's definitely some years after impact has happened, where basically now they're both the leaders of the New Haven farm. By day it's kind of this like community where everybody kind of works together and lives together and all of that. And so Faith and Jackson by day are leaders of the community. They don't really talk a lot or share a lot about themselves, but they're both leaders of this community. But by night she actually sneaks into his room and some fun happens. So this one was a lot of fun. I loved seeing her kind of sneak into his room. The comfort and solace that they find in one another's arms is so good. Like I said, this one's a novella length. This is my intro to this series and world by Claire Kent, and I was obsessed and hooked. Definitely recommend. Next up is Princess. So in here we follow Olivia and Grant, And this one's a little bit different. So basically in here, Olivia's family, or her father in particular, was kind of wealthy, and he set up for them to live in this kind of like silo, or a converted silo, after impact happened. And so all these people have been kind of in this underground silo, protected, and kind of have their own community feeling. And so Grant was actually like, he used to be like security or something, and now he kind of acts as her bodyguard. He teaches her how to fight. Again, we have age gap, we have bodyguard moments, protective hero. Love this one. Like, they end up having to kind of live together in the silo and then come out of the silo and figure out what's going on up above Earth when they come out of there. So yeah, love this one. The protectiveness, so good. All right, so next up is Embers, which is one of my favorites in the series. And again, we get age gap in here, and this one has some angsty vibes to it as well. So in here, we follow Cal and Rachel for a few years. We kind of see how they came to be living together. Basically, Rachel, when the impact happened, moved in with her boyfriend at the time. They were like in high school, I want to say, and that boyfriend's dad is Cal. And so at the time, she was living with her high school boyfriend and his dad, and kind of all of that because things happened to her family when impact happened. And so we see how over time her boyfriend ended up passing away. And so now Cal and Rachel have just been living together, working together, just trying to survive and stay alive for years together. Like I said, this series brings gruff heroes, and Cal in this one is the epitome of a gruff hero who doesn't think he's worthy of anything good in life. So I loved Rachel kind of bringing it out of him and showing him that he's worthy of so much more. And like I mentioned, he's also her late boyfriend's dad. So we have that kind of like angstiness to it. So good. Highly recommend. Next up is Hero. And this one, like Haven, this is a novella length. This one as well, we have a single dad hero and age gap as well. So in this one, we follow Esther and Zed. So in this one, we see that Esther and Zed were living together, but also with a bunch of other people within their families. I believe the hero in this one was her late stepdad's brother. So like they're not related at all. He's kind of like, I guess, a step uncle, so to speak. But anyways, that's kind of the setup for this one. So in here, Esther actually has anxiety a lot. And so she wakes up in the night with these anxious feelings and thoughts and panic attacks. So Zed one night ends up waking up with her. And so he tries to talk to her and just figure out what's going on. And so they're talking, and next thing you know, they're arguing, and then they're kissing and ending up in bed together. And then the next morning they wake up and neither of them talks about it at all, doesn't bring it up until that night they're in bed together again. I just love this one so much. I'm always down for a single dad hero. And so like I said, the hero in here, he has a daughter. I loved her relationship with Esther as well. Just so sweet and so cute. I really enjoyed this one. All right, next up is Citadel. And in this one, we follow Cole and Dell, where basically Cole at the beginning of the story ends up having to rescue Dell and her sister when they get into this like tricky situation with a group that they've been staying with. They end up traveling together, and kind of Cole and Dell get to know one another as they're traveling. They end up sharing a night together, but then the next morning he takes off. And so this one turns into a little bit of a second chance, because we cut to 2 years later and he shows back up. And of course, you know the reasons of why he left, and you kind of find that out in the story as well. And so yeah, it's a little bit of a second chance. Like, are they going to work it out? Who knows? But we know. But yeah, this one's so good. All right, and then next up is Sanctuary. So if any in the series that you have to read together, it's Citadel and Sanctuary, because their stories really connect. They follow the two sisters. And so yeah, those two stories you definitely need to read kind of in order. The rest of the series you could kind of jump in whenever, I guess, technically. But yeah, those two you should read back to back. So this one's actually my least favorite in the series, but it's still a good time as well. All right, so in this one we follow Brianna and Aiden, and they are kind of both messengers or couriers, where they go and like pick up items for people. They take messages between communities and things like that. Pre-Brianna working as a messenger and courier, she actually ended up using her body for whatever means necessary to protect her and her sister Dell, which was, like I said, the heroine of the previous book. And so we kind of have that situation and trauma in her backstory as well. So this one is a little bit darker as well, just because of that. So like I said, Brianna and Aiden kind of have the same job, and she ends up taking jobs within the kind of area that he's always worked in. So he kind of sees that as her kind of trying to step on his turf. So they get into like a little bit of an argument a lot and all of that. And then one of their clients or his customers ends up saying like, maybe I'll work with her, and like I'll work with whichever of you can bring me the item the fastest. And so it sets off into this kind of like race for them to go in and get whatever item that the person needs. And so we see them kind of traveling, trying to beat one another there. They end up getting snowed in, and so they have to end up in this sanctuary, hence the name of this book. And so yeah, the snowstorm ends up forcing them together, traps them in there together, where they have to kind of confront their feelings, this kind of like push and pull banter that they have. So it kind of goes from there. Like I said, this one's probably my least favorite in the series, but I love the series overall. So even if I didn't love this one, like it's still good. And so yeah, this one's trapped in a snowstorm, forced proximity, age gap. All right, so next up is Homestead, and this is the one that just came out last week, and I love this one so much. This one is age gap again, and here we have a kind of marriage or partnership of convenience. So in this one we follow Jimmy and Chloe, and basically Jimmy ends up saving Chloe at the beginning of the story, where something happens to her, and so he rescues her and takes her back back to the community of farmers where he lives and works with. And so basically in this one, Chloe has lived with her grandfather kind of off the grid. Her grandfather was like a prepper even before the impact days. And so he had this like whole place and shelter and food and all of that for them. So she lived with him isolated on their own for I think like 9 years, I want to say. And so since impact happened, and so they had to come out of their kind of place. She lost her grandfather now, and she ends up getting rescued by Jimmy. So shortly after Chloe comes to live with Jimmy and kind of his family and friends and like the community that he lives with, he ends up offering up this kind of like partnership of convenience. It's kind of like classified as like a marriage of convenience in their world. So basically he's like, you know what, I have my own place. So do you want to come and live with me, kind of share the workload, the chores, also just like have a place to yourself, but also like I need a partner in all ways because I'm kind of lonely. These characters though can be a little aggravating at times because they just don't communicate very well, and neither of them thinks the other one is in it for the long run. But you can see they're starting to develop feelings, and you're like, just talk it out. You're both in it for the right things. But of course you got to see them kind of go through it all. So yeah, I really love this one. If you haven't read it, like I said, it just dropped on Kindle Unlimited last week. Highly recommend. And then the next one that's supposed to come out in the fall, which is Beacon. This one has been a story that's been hinted at for books and books and books. And so hopefully we finally get it. So this is supposed to be Mac and Anna's story, where basically they've had this kind of like on and off again, no strings attached relationship for years. In the previous story, we see how Mac ends up actually taking off and going to live in this isolated forest on his own, and he's kind of refusing or not coming out. And so Anna has to like figure out what's going on, is where I'm assuming the story is going to go. So I can't wait for this one. It's supposed to come out in like fall 2024, hopefully. All right, so those are all the post-apocalyptic romance recs that I have for you from Claire Kent. Like I said, I highly recommend this entire series so much. I love them to pieces. Highly recommend. They're all on Kindle Unlimited. Definitely check them out. Like especially if you love a gruff kind of closed off cold hero where the heroine has to like pull everything out of him. So good. So definitely let me know in the comments if you're picking up the series, if you've read any of them, if you're going to, if you have any of those things, if you have any post-apocalyptic romance recs for me, definitely let me know in the comments as well. If you'd rather leave me an emoji to let me know that you watched this video today, leave me like the pine tree emoji, because I feel like it's all very like isolated in forest, naturey, all those things. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I'll see you in my next one.